Let me start with something most people misunderstand. Not every person who feels sad is depressed, and not every person who looks fine is mentally well. Because sadness and depression are not the same psychological experience, but people confuse them constantly. And when people confuse them, they misread themselves. Sometimes they pathologize normal human pain. Other times they normalize something that actually needs care. And both mistakes cost people years of their lives. Let me make this plain. Sadness is an emotion. Depression is a condition. Those are not the same thing. One is something you feel. The other is something that begins changing your mind, your body, your energy, your motivation, your relationships, and sometimes even your sense of self. And if a person does not understand the difference, they may think, I'm just going through something, when in reality, their whole internal system may already be shutting down. Or they may think, something is wrong with me because I feel sad, when in reality, they may be having an honest human response to loss. That distinction matters more than most people realize, because some pain needs space and some pain needs treatment. Sadness hurts. Depression changes the whole system that is trying to carry the hurt. Before this video ends, you are going to be able to hear someone describe what they are going through and think, that's sadness, or that is depression. And that kind of clarity changes how people respond to themselves. We are also going to translate the DSM-5 TR criteria for depression into real human language. Not clinical jargon, language you can recognize in your own life or in someone you love. And most importantly, we are going to identify the exact psychological shift where sadness stops moving and starts becoming something heavier. Because depression rarely begins all at once. It usually begins when pain stops flowing and starts settling into the structure of daily life. Sadness is like rain moving through the sky. Depression is when the climate itself changes. One is weather. The other is a system shift. One passes through experience. The other begins reorganizing experience. And if you do not know the difference, you may wait too long to get help. Let's start with sadness, because sadness is not a malfunction. Sadness is a healthy emotional response. Sadness happens when something meaningful changes. A relationship ends. A person disappoints you. A dream does not happen. You lose an opportunity. Someone you love dies. A life expectation changes. Sadness is your emotional system saying something important mattered. That is not pathology. That is meaning. Psychology actually has a name for what is happening here. Sadness is part of emotional processing. Your mind is integrating loss, reorganizing expectations, updating reality, recalibrating meaning. That matters because many people experience sadness and immediately think they are broken. But sadness is often evidence that your emotional system is working. If you never felt sadness, that would actually be more concerning, because sadness means you are capable of attachment, capable of love, capable of emotional investment, capable of caring deeply enough for life to affect you. Sadness is painful, but sadness is often proof that your inner world is still alive. Imagine someone whose long-term relationship ended. They wake up and feel the ache of the absence. The house feels different. Music hits different. Their chest feels heavy. They cry in the shower. They think about what they lost. But later that afternoon, they laugh at something a friend says. That night, they still feel the grief, but they can also feel relief and maybe even gratitude. That is important. because sadness allows multiple emotions to coexist. Sadness hurts, but sadness still moves. A sad person may feel pain without losing access to everything else. They can still connect, still imagine better days, still receive comfort, and still feel life touching them in other places. Sadness is like a bruise. It hurts, but the bruise also tells you something impacted you. And over time, if healing is allowed, the body recovers. The pain has meaning. The pain has a source, and the pain is still connected to movement. Clear. Sadness usually includes a clear reason, emotional movement, access to other emotions, gradual improvement over time. A sad person can still enjoy music, still feel brief relief, still connect with others, still imagine better days. That matters because sadness hurts, but sadness usually retains motion. Me says, this hurts. Myself says, I miss what I had. I says, I'm going to get through this, even if I cry. That is an important inner structure. Sadness lets people feel pain without fully losing hope, connection, and meaning. But now let's move into the part people misunderstand most. Because depression is not simply sadness that got bigger, it is something more systemic than that. And if a person misses that difference, they can misread the whole condition. Depression is not just deeper sadness. That is one of the biggest misconceptions in mental health. Depression is a whole system condition. It affects mood, thinking, energy, motivation, sleep, appetite, concentration, self-worth, sense of meaning. And sometimes a person experiencing depression does not even describe themselves as sad. Sometimes they say, I feel empty, I feel numb, I feel flat. I don't even have the energy to explain what is wrong. That matters because depression is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it looks like disappearing while still being present. Sometimes it looks like functioning just enough to survive while internally shutting down. Sadness says something hurts. Depression says everything feels heavy. Let's translate the DSM-5 TR into real language. A major depressive episode involves at least 5 symptoms present during the same 2-week period. One of them must be either depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. That loss of pleasure has a name. Psychology calls it anhedonia. That means the things that used to feel meaningful, enjoyable, or engaging no longer reach you in the same way. Change in appetite. Other symptoms include changes in appetite, sleep disturbance, moving or thinking more slowly, or sometimes feeling internally agitated, fatigue, excessive guilt, worthlessness, difficulty concentrating, thoughts of death. And these symptoms create real impairment. Life becomes harder. Relationships become harder. Basic functioning becomes harder. This is where the line becomes clinically important. Because sadness hurts inside life, depression begins interfering with the person's ability to live life. Sadness is pain with movement. Depression is pain with drain. Sadness says, this mattered. Depression says, nothing feels reachable. Sadness can cry and still connect. Depression can silence emotion and disconnect from meaning. That is not just intensity. That is a different mechanism. Here is what sadness often sounds like. I'm hurting. This is painful. I miss what I had. This mattered to me. Notice that sadness still has a relationship to meaning. Now listen to what depression sounds like. I feel empty. I feel numb. Nothing matters. I can't get myself to care. I'm tired all the time. I should care, but I can't access it. That is a very different internal experience. Sadness hurts. Depression drains meaning. That is one of the deepest clinical distinctions. Sadness says, this hurts. Depression says, why does anything matter? This is the tipping point. Sadness is crying while still seeing clearly. Depression is fog covering everything. Your life is still there, but it feels distant, muted, heavy, blunted. It's not just that pain is present. It is that access starts disappearing. Me says, get up, do something. Myself says, what's the point? I says, I should care. Myself says, I can't access it. Me says, I'm failing. And that is the trap. Depression turns a condition into something that feels like a character flaw. And this is where many people need a major shift in how they think. A depressed person is not necessarily weak, not lazy, not lacking gratitude, not failing at life. They may be carrying a condition that is changing energy, motivation, concentration, emotion, and meaning all at once. And when people misunderstand that, they moralize what should be treated. That is dangerous, because once a person starts believing their condition is a character defect, shame intensifies and help gets delayed. People confuse sadness and depression because both can look like feeling low, but the mechanisms are different. Sadness is usually tied to grief, disappointment, emotional processing, and adjusting to loss. Sadness helps the system adapt to reality, painful but purposeful. Depression often involves chronic stress, trauma, biological vulnerability, nervous system dysregulation, sleep disruption, inflammation, and learned helplessness. Sadness processes pain. Depression develops when sadness is like one program crashing. Depression is when the entire operating system slows down. Thinking becomes harder. Moving becomes harder. Deciding becomes harder. Caring becomes harder. This is why telling a depressed person to just cheer up is psychologically uninformed. You are not talking to a person with one bad thought. You may be talking to a person whose entire system is under strain. Now let's translate this through the nervous system. Sadness can activate the system, but usually the system still retains flexibility. The person can feel distress, then settle, cry, then connect, withdraw briefly, then return. Depression is different. Depression often involves a more prolonged collapse in energy, drive, and responsiveness. The system can begin conserving instead of engaging. Movement drops. Initiation drops. Motivation drops. Hope drops. And once the nervous system begins pairing life with depletion, even basic tasks can start feeling enormous. That is why depression often sounds like, I know what I should do, I just cannot get myself to do it. This is not always defiance. Often it is depletion. Now let's go one layer deeper. Human beings do not organize emotion in isolation. They organize emotion in relationship. So when a person experiences sadness, healthy connection often helps it move. Someone listens, sits with them, helps them metabolize what hurts. But depression can start changing that relational process. That person withdraws, feels like a burden, feels hard to reach, feels ashamed of needing people. And if someone has an attachment history where pain was not met well, depression can become even heavier. Because now suffering is not only being felt, it is being carried alone. Sadness often wants comfort. Depression often loses access to the belief that comfort will help. And this leads us to one of the most important questions in the whole conversation. When exactly does sadness begin turning into depression? Because that shift rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It usually happens gradually. Here are the warning signs that sadness may be shifting toward depression. Loss of interest. Things that used to matter stop feeling meaningful. Persistent exhaustion. Rest stops restoring energy. Emotional numbness. Not just pain, nothing. Withdrawal. Connection starts feeling like work. Hopelessness. The future stops feeling possible. This is where the shift becomes clinically important. Sadness still imagines better days. Depression starts believing nothing will change. And hopelessness is the most dangerous part because hopelessness shrinks perceived options. When perceived options shrink, people suffer in silence longer. Pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, am I experiencing sadness with a clear reason? Am I experiencing sadness that will not move? Am I experiencing numbness? Am I experiencing hopelessness about the future? Clarity matters because clarity reduces shame, and shame keeps people silent. And here is another place where depression does damage. It does not only affect mood, it begins affecting identity. A person stops saying, I am going through something hard, and starts saying, I am a burden, I am broken, I am failing. I am becoming someone I do not recognize. That identity shift is serious because when pain becomes identity, recovery gets harder to imagine. Feeling sad does not mean something is wrong with you. Sadness means you are human. But when sadness becomes persistent and starts affecting your ability to live, connect, function, and imagine a future, that deserves care. You do not get a trophy for suffering quietly. You get support for telling the truth. Pain does not become noble just because it stays hidden. Sadness and depression both deserve compassion, but they do not require exactly the same response. Sadness often needs space, expression, support, and time. Depression often needs structure, support, treatment, connection, and sometimes professional care. Healing may include therapy, medical evaluation, medication when appropriate, sleep stabilization, routine, movement, reducing isolation, small achievable actions, honest conversations. And one of the most important tools in this, recovery from depression is not always about feeling happy first. Sometimes it begins with restoring movement before emotion fully returns. That matters because many people wait to feel better before they act. But depression often requires supportive action before better feelings fully arrive. Now let's connect all of this to the GYG system. Because understanding psychology is not just about awareness, it is about integration, family. First and most importantly, love yourself. Inside every person is an internal family. Sadness may activate the grieving part, the longing part, the tender part. Depression may activate the shutdown part, the numb part, the critic part, the hopeless part. These parts are not enemies. They are signals, adaptations, attempts to survive emotional pressure. Real. Recognizing every aspect of life. Real means recognizing your emotions, your limits, your stress level, your capacity, and the pattern you are actually in. Ignoring sadness does not make it disappear. Ignoring depression does not make it resolve. Recognizing is the beginning of healing. Think it, speak it, do it. Sadness loop. Think, this hurts. Speak, I'm grieving. Do, rest, cry, connect. Depression loop. Think, nothing matters. Speak, I'm a burden. Do, Withdraw, recovery loop. Think, this is a condition. Speak, I need support. Do, small action, connection, care. IDC, intentional, deliberate, creative living. Intentional means noticing early warning signs. Deliberate means creating supportive structure. Creative means adjusting expectations without abandoning yourself. Devotion. Devotion means staying with yourself even when you do not feel like yourself, because healing requires loyalty to your own life. Integration. Recovery is not forcing happiness. Recovery is rebuilding energy, connection, meaning, and capacity. Trajectories. Left unaddressed, depression changes life trajectories. Addressed early, people can rebuild them. Identity construction. Depression is something a person experiences. It is not who they are. So let's say this clearly. A person experiencing depression is not failing at being alive. They are not defective because they cannot currently access what used to come easily. And a person experiencing sadness is not weak because they feel deeply. Sadness is a part of being human. Depression is a condition that deserves care. And once people understand the difference, they stop blaming themselves for the wrong thing. That changes everything. Sadness is part of being alive. Depression is when the system that helps you feel alive begins to shut down. Both deserve compassion, but they require different responses. Remember the questions from the beginning? How do you know whether something is sadness or depression? Listen for movement. Listen for meaning. Listen for access. Listen for whether the person can still feel, connect, hope, and imagine. Sadness hurts, but still moves. Depression drains, slows, and disconnects. And when you understand that clearly, you stop pathologizing normal pain and you stop minimizing real suffering. If something in this helped you understand yourself or someone you care about, share it with them, because clarity about mental health changes lives. And if there is a psychological topic you want broken down next, tell me in the comments. I read them and I'm build from them. This is not just content. It is a learning community. Understanding your psychology matters. It helps you understand the patterns shaping your life. Understand clearly. Integrate deeply. Grow yourself great.